Cool. We are now live.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Good morning.
How's it
How
going,
are you?
everyone?
Good.
Steve, put away that rubber pencil. You're distracting everybody. Oh, welcome to 2019. Nice shirts. To Zach
Yep.
and Renee, I guess.
Yeah, I wore mine to the meetup, and Steve was supposed to wear his with me, so that we both looked like assholes. And then instead, I just
said
looked like-
only you look like one.
It didn't matter anyway. I was wearing like 4 layers on top of my t-shirt, so nobody would have ever seen it. Because it was freezing in there.
Although I'm highly jealous of Steve's t-shirt right now, so we'll explain why later, I suppose. But
That's right.
boom.
So, we have a lot of stuff to talk about, so I suppose
So
we
much good,
should-
juicy stuff. I
should
can't
just
wait.
get right into it. I'll go first on the individual stuff. First wanted to give a shout out to Dave Kirscher, who sent me this Dr. Pepper boot cup, which tells you, where's the camera here? To be a pepper, just taste. And I am actually drinking, this fit an entire 16-ounce can of Dr. Pepper, so awesome
Nice.
gift. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And,
Yeah, it's
16-ounce can? They have 16-ounce cans?
yeah, the tall boys, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I will be getting shit faced off of Dave's absinthe today. Thank you very much. My little brother sent me he's mid-30s, but sent me absinthe glasses, which maybe they're just short glasses, and he called them absinthe glasses. I'm not gonna fucking look it up, but it's fancy. It's already been turned to color, and I'm gonna get shitty and tell the truth, which I try not to do when I'm live because I always get in trouble.
Sounds good. So yeah, for my individual thing, I just wanted to mention me and Steve took a little trip out to Magfest this weekend. Saw some awesome bands play. If you haven't heard of people like Mega Ran, who does hip hop, he put on an amazing show. Super cool. What else was there? Curious Quail was another band we saw. Incorporates like a Game Boy chiptune into rock type music. Danimal Cannon's, similar kind of thing. But yeah, tons of bands. Really awesome event. Can't believe it's only $75 to go for 4 days. So if you had never been there, consider going next year. But
I think the interesting trend is all the new jazz bands. There's
Right,
tons of jazz bands.
yeah, there was Game Brass, Insane in the Rain. Who was the other one? The other jazz Console.
Console was awesome. It was like at 2 a.m., but it was my favorite show.
Yeah, this thing goes
Console.
24/7, so it's well worth your money. It's just a little hard to get a hotel room, so keep that in mind. But that's my whole update.
They played all the Cuphead music. The composer was there. He was emceeing the event for this band playing his own music.
Nice.
Mega Man 2 composer was there too.
Yes, he was there too.
So yeah, pretty sweet.
So for us foreigners, where is Magfest?
It's in Washington, D.C., right near the airport.
Ah, nice.
About
The airport that's featured in Die Hard 2, is that right?
which one's in Die Hard 2? This one's at Reagan. I think that might be Dulles,
Oh.
but I don't remember.
Yeah, it's Dulles and Die Hard, damn it.
Yeah, Dulles is really Virginia Airport. I don't
Okay.
know why it's called the D.C. one, but anyway, cool. Bob, since I always skip you, what's up with you?
I'd like to forfeit mine and ask Zach a quick question. But we all like to tease each other here. I certainly love to be the butt of the jokes. So I will just this once, for just this one moment, ask Zach to just tell everybody what he told me without joking around about the desoldering gun that I sent.
Oh yeah. So Bob was using this Chinese clone of the Hako desoldering gun that comes after the 888. Can't think of the name of it. It's the FR. I think it's the FR 400 or the 410. Anyways, it's a Chinese clone of that. And Bob sent me the gun, and he was having trouble with it. He destroyed multiple systems, trying to do things with it, mainly because he just doesn't know what he's doing. But secondly, the tool wasn't working very well. So I took it and I cleaned it. I cleaned it thoroughly. I cleaned the pipes. And because Bob never cleaned it, really. and it worked well, and then it stopped working well after about 3 pulls of the trigger. It lost all suction. And what it comes down to is maintenance. It's a crappy gun because Bob doesn't do maintenance. There's a little valve. There's a little valve in the suction pump that's supposed to be very rubbery, and it's supposed to move very freely. Well, if you don't clean these guns, and if you don't clean those filters and change those filters out, a hard residue of flux will caramelize and crystallize over this little rubber piece that's supposed to very freely articulate, move, and it'll be very stiff. And so if you don't maintain your equipment, even cheaper equipment like Bob was using, and you don't maintain it, the lifespan of that equipment is going to be diminished within, piece of equipment that may last you 5 years. If it's maintained well, may last you for 5 months, maybe even 5 weeks. But mainly it's just Bob's lack of cleanliness.
But the other station that you recommended, I have it right here, the ZD915, that doesn't require as crazy of cleaning every time you use it, right? You just clear the nozzle and you're good?
That's right. You clear the nozzle and you're good, and you change those filters regularly. And another thing, too, is whenever you're using any of these cheap Chinese knockoff desoldering stations, replace those little white round filters with real Hakko ceramic filters, and that will make a world of difference in terms of maintenance. But yes, it really wasn't completely Bob's fault as to why the original gun failed so prematurely. It was probably 60% maintenance, 40% just the design of that thing. But if you maintain it well, it'll work as well as it's supposed to. But I want to do a whole desoldering video as far as equipment is concerned here very soon. So I get asked that a lot, and I feel that it's important to talk about broadly. So there you go, Bob. I hope that that's not what you wanted me to say. You told me you would give me $100.
Exactly. And the point that I'm trying to make by having you explain this is I could talk to them blue in the face, but you guys all really know what you're doing. I'm just kind of tagging along and doing all right. But I can't tell everybody how many hours of my life were wasted because of that desoldering gun. And the one that I just got here, the full station, was $5 more expensive. So I could have saved hours of my life. I could have saved that Genesis. I could have saved hours of Cruz's life when he fixed it for me. Like, for $5, if I had only... And you even told me. I remember you told me this one was better, but it's a full station with the gun alongside, and I was hoping to go with the smaller one, the smaller package. But no, that's totally stupid. I wasted so many hours of my life and at least 2 consoles on this piece of shit. So buy good equipment and don't waste time like I did. And I'm telling you, anybody, I can't remember what video it was, but the new station that I got, it is effortless. And maybe it's effortless because I worked with such a crappy station for so long, but I mean, it is literally just ding, ding, ding. It looks exactly like Voltar's videos now. Push the thing, wiggle it till it gets hot, pull the trigger, then pull the gun off. I mean, it looks exactly like you in your videos. It's that simple. So
if it looks exactly like I do in my videos, Bob, then I have a serious problem on my hand.
All right, I'm done.
But no, that's true. That's true. Just to sort of finish that off, equipment is, technique is everything. But if you have good equipment is not synonymous with expensive equipment either. If you have good equipment can compensate for a lot of poor techniques. And as far as Bob is concerned, Bob is the absolute antithesis of good technique. So let that be. That's good enough.
I mean, it's funny that you say that, though, because I worked so hard the past few years to try to get better, to try to keep up, just because, I can't be friends with you guys and fucking just do a shit garbage job, cover it in glue. And I think because I was using such garbage equipment, once I got the soldering station that Banggood's paying you to talk about, and this desoldering pump, everything changed in overnight. All that, because I tried so hard with that junk. Now that I have good equipment, everything's nice and smooth. Worked perfect.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like I said, good equipment is not synonymous to or analogous. it is not expensive equipment necessarily. And for $40 with that coupon code, I think it's $40. You get a pretty good soldering station. So,
Yeah, love it.
Anyways,
Really love it.
Let's go on. I'm tired of talking about stuff with you, Bob.
All right,
please.
Steve, tell us how bad your TV show was.
Oh yeah. When we got back from Magfest. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you mentioned we met Paul from Infinite.
Oh,
NES
right.
Lives.
Yeah, that was something I should have mentioned. We had dinner
Nice
with
guy.
Paul, and yeah, super cool dude. It was really awesome to hear his backstory and kind of how he transitioned from being in the military and then his job and then doing this thing full time. So shout out to him. It was a real pleasure hearing that
He's in the
story.
chat.
Cool.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet. And then also shout out to Dan Coons, even though Bob bought these for me. Dan is the reason why I have these awesome root beers. But thanks to both of you, actually. But yeah, so when we got back from Magfest, it was weird. Like, we weren't just constantly working. We actually sat on the couch and you put Netflix on.
Ooh.
I don't have Netflix. And we watched the second. Actually, we started from the beginning. We rewatched the first season of Castlevania on Netflix.
Great season.
Great season. I really liked it. I had 3 minor quibbles with it, which was that the language was over the top, unnecessarily, that it was a little stupid. I thought, and then the gore was also a little bit over the top,
I like
intestines, but it was unnecessary. They just did it because they could, which never.
Go back to your fucking
as
public
it for me.
access television, Steve.
And-
Nobody
and-
cares.
And then the third thing was Sypha's accent was just so over the top, fake. It's an accent that doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
But other than that, the season was awesome. Then I'm watching the second season. They have more episodes because the first season, spoiler alert, they set up to go fight Dracula. They get their team assembled. It's all right, second season they're gonna go fight Dracula. Instead, they had 5 episodes or 4 episodes of vampire drama, which
It was
so annoying.
It was like watching Cheers and Dracula's castle unfold.
Yeah, the writers really should have been constrained to 4 episodes for that season too, and just get to the point. Yeah, the extra time that they had was wasted.
It reminded me of, I don't know if anybody here watched Bleach, but when they had in Hueco Mundo, they had the Espada and they were quibbling with each other. It was the same type of just waste of time. And I don't know if they pitched this again to Netflix or whatever. They know vampire drama is more people like that. A general audience likes vampire drama and all that stuff. But Castlevania wasn't really about vampire drama.
Yeah.
There's all this waste of time, and then so you got 4 episodes of crap, 4 or 5 episodes, and then there was these 2 awesome episodes where you thought it was going to start out like this, where they're going into Dracula's castle and doing all these awesome battles, and then the last episode also was, It was really bad. They tried to set up for this whole other season, and I don't even care about. I don't need to watch that anymore. It was just a shame because they did such a good job before, and they screwed it up.
Yeah, fuck off.
Was there a lot of walking diagonally up the stairs?
No, not enough.
Almost none.
I think
Mostly just reading books. That was most of the season was people reading books. So
there was far too much as far as the pacing of, in my opinion, the pacing that should be sort of set for a story like that. There was far too much character exposition for characters that aren't even instrumental or pivotal to the story. Far too much time was wasted on gas like that. And then for me, like I told Steve, I might have misspoke, but he asked me about it. I said, yeah, the last 2 episodes were great. I think I meant the second to last 2 episodes were badass, where they storm, together. And they start,
That was really good. I had no problem with that. They play Bloody Tears remix music. That was
So
really
you're not
awesome.
going to. So you're not even going to give the Symphony of the Night series a chance because that's allegedly where they're going now. It's going to be, that's what I read. Alucard is going to be entering the castle of Dracula during the Symphony of the Night era.
I thought that they were setting up for this stupid vampire woman doing shit now.
Yeah, Hector stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
Hector stuff.
is that from the Genesis? Is that the
Hector,
Genesis?
Hector, it's from A Curse of Darkness. It's the Xbox, the second PS2 one, but it was also ported to Xbox.
Oh, but I did like. Speaking of that, I did like that they had. I did like that they had Leon Belmont's equipment there in the Belmont estate from Lament of Innocence.
They had his portrait too.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, that was cool. That was one of those episodes. That was the good one.
All right, thanks, Robert Ebert. What's Renee been up to?
Hello, I'm Leonard Maltin.
Roger Ebert, not Robert Ebert.
So I work in a school, so I was off of work for the 2 weeks during the holidays. It was excellent. I didn't touch a computer for those 2 weeks. It was marvelous. I just, I stayed on social media with my telephone, but never turned on the computer. It was great. The main things that I did is we bought a Nintendo Switch for our kids, and we bought it all the way back in October. So for about 2 months, I was waiting to play the Switch. Finally, plugged it in and tried it, and it's amazing. I think it's an excellent console. I have no interest in getting like a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox just because I feel it keeps being more of the same. But I think the Switch has something extra to offer, and so far I've been really impressed with it. I especially like Sonic Mania. Actually, I know I'm saying I want new things, but then I'm playing an old school game on it. But I feel like Sonic Mania is a really fun game, and I've been playing a lot of Sonic Mania on it. Kids really like, the kids really like Mario Odyssey, obviously, and I picked up a whole bunch of other games like Mega Man 11 and.
But did you
Mario
get
Kart.
any Beat It 2019s yet?
You know what? My plan was I bought the Switch and I was going to play Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I bought that game. And then I looked at my Wii U collection and I noticed I have Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, and I thought, ugh. Okay, so I'm going to beat those first. So I maybe 10 hours or so into Wind Waker HD. I beat it on GameCube in 2003 when it came out, but that's 15, 16 years ago now. So it feels like I'm playing the game
all over again, or new,
brand new. Like I don't remember how to do the dungeons. I remember like vaguely what the story was, but I mean back then I played it. It was connected with the Game Boy Advance, and you had Tingle on it, and now all of that's different, right? So there are new aspects to the game, which is a lot of fun. So I'm gonna beat Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD before I move on to Breath of the Wild.
Whenever you're finished with all of those, please leave yourself a note to give us another little recap on after you've played all of the HD remakes and then that back to back. Is there one that stands out as your favorite? Because the only Zelda games that I finished in years on main platforms, I loved Link Between Worlds, but I finished Breath of the Wild and I liked it, and I finished Skyward Sword and I thought a lot of it was unnecessary. I thought like 8 hours of it was fetch quest. So I'm interested to see if you think that the HD remakes of the other two would compare.
Yeah, I'm going to post about it. They are going to be Beat It 2019s, obviously, and I'll talk about them as I beat them on the podcast as well.
Yeah, beat it off.
But thus far, I mean, I've played most of the Zelda games, and ever since 2003, Wind Waker HD has been Wind Waker has been the one that stands out to me all the time. I absolutely love that game. I feel that's the most timeless one. It's just you could look at it 16 years later, and I think because of the graphical style they chose, it still stands out as excellent and awesome. It feels like you're playing a cartoon, and I love that.
Yes, that's the thing. When it came out, I played it for like 5 minutes, and I was like, "Oh, I can't stand the way this looks," and I never played it again.
Oh,
so maybe I'll check it out in HD, and with the older and wiser, if you will.
Yeah, idiot. All right.
And the other thing I did during the holidays is on the last stream, Steve talked a bit about the Tetris and the Classic Tetris World Championship. So I decided to watch a bit of that on YouTube, and
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry I ruined your life.
It was a life-changing event for me. So, I mean, obviously I had a copy of Tetris, but I'd never experienced Tetris. So now I started playing Tetris aggressively. I must have played I'm probably going to say 300 to 400 rounds of Tetris thus far. I'm practicing really, really, really hard. And my New Year's resolution this year is to be able to max out the score on this game. So for those that don't know, the score counter has 6 digits on Tetris. So if you reach 999,999, that's a max out score. The game will stop counting after that. It's notoriously difficult, but I want to get there.
Yeah, I think we should go to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo and watch the tournament and have you qualified.
Yep, that's where the big championship is every year.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So maybe I'll get a Boom Tetris for Renee shirt.
I think the lowest qualifying score in the tournament last year was like 550,000.
But there are only a few non-max outs this past year. I feel like everybody who qualifies next year is going to max out. I think they might have to use the tournament cart with the extra digit now for qualifying because there's going to be too many max outs.
Yep.
Well, it's something we should all go to, I think.
Yeah,
that'd be cool. Like maybe we should apply for a panel or something.
Yeah, apply for a wood panel.
Voltar, you got anything you wanted to talk about, or should we get into it?
Fuck no. Fuck this. I don't even want to do this podcast. But since you asked,
we don't want to hear anyway, so mutual.
I mean, well, Bob. I mean, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't even be around. But listen, the point that I'm trying to make with all of this, Renee brings up some good stuff. The wife or Santa Claus bought me Mega Man 11, which I've beaten a couple of stages on this, and Octopath Traveler, which is still sealed. But more importantly, I feel that the PlayStation 4 library is mature enough for me to invest in. And so I got a PlayStation 4 for Christmas. And because I got a PlayStation 4 for Christmas, I've got a lot of cool games. I pretty much bought the entire Resident Evil collection, Resident Evil Origins, which is the GameCube Resident Evil, and Zero. I've got Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, Revelations 1, Revelations 2. But there's also a lot of good there are also a lot of good exclusives to the PlayStation 4. I'm really excited to run back through, I don't know if this is exclusive or not, but Final Fantasy X and X2 that's been remastered for the PS4. Looking forward to going through that. The Last of Us HD remastered. Looking really forward to going through that. Here's another super cool exclusive is Kingdom Shards. This is the story so far, and this was released back in October. And that is every Kingdom Shards game, including the portable games that have been remastered, up until the game that's coming out, I think, in this month in January, Kingdom Shards 3 or 4. So I'm really excited to get this. Is going to take me 7 months to play, and of course,
that's to get everyone up to speed on this new one that's coming out.
This is to get. This is a Kingdom Shards boot camp to get you up to task for the latest game, and also a PlayStation powerhouse remastered, Shadow of the Colossus.
As
really
someone
excited.
in the chat mentioned, you should also get The Last Guardian, which is by the same folks.
I have it. It's on the shelf. I have it.
Okay, yeah.
It's good.
Awesome game.
And Red Dead Redemption 2, I have to make time for it. But at any rate, like I said, PlayStation 4 a year ago, 2 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have bought one. But now, I think the library is plentiful enough to where the purchase is warranted and merited. So I'm quite excited to play through all these. Other than that, I've been doing a lot of cool mod stuff. Here's a Famicom. Here's a Famicom that I've been working on that I did a by hand NES RGB install. And when I say by hand, I literally mean by hand.
I love that thing.
Everything is wired in by hand. This is all kind of bodgy because when I was doing this, I was trying to figure out the best way to do it. So I'm going to do an actual video on this process, and it's going to look much cleaner than all this stuff kind of running back and forth. But I even drilled a hole in the in the RF modulator, and I ran a cable through, and I've got this little multi-out that is it's hot glue potted and then wrapped in black tape. It's my personal console, and this will outlast most SCART cable connectors that come from Europe. At any rate,
I love that thing so much. It's a no-cut mod. You don't have to even cut the plastic. That's so fucking cool.
And down here is Bordy's
Degener, or in-game reset.
In-game reset and palette changer. And I've actually, speaking of that, I don't have one here to show you, but I have. Bordy made this, first of all, just to preface this, Bordy made an in-game reset and an NES RGB palette changer circuit several years ago. I have taken that, and he open sourced it. So I took it, and I shaped it out into something that sort of did what I wanted it to do. And I tweeted a picture of this. It's much smaller, and I've made a few little edits here and there to it. But I'm going to be giving that away freely for anyone who wants to use it. It's free. I'll also be selling it, and I'll also be offering it for any future NES RGB installs that don't want that palette switch cut through their hole or cut through their plastics or anything like that. It's just to help with sort of this no-cut movement. It's just a new take. So at any rate, that's what I've been doing. I want to enjoy these games, and I beat Metal Gear. I did beat the Phantom Pain again. I beat this on the PlayStation 3 a couple of years ago. As nice as the Fox engine is, it scales really well on the PS3, but the frame rate was so crappy, and there were so many other little problems with the Phantom Pain on the PS3, I just couldn't enjoy it as much, so I decided to run back through it, and that's what I did over holiday break. Otherwise, modding a lot of stuff. Got a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline here. Got a lot of good videos. I've been too busy to shoot any, but there are plenty in the pipeline. And that's it for me.
Sweet. Let's.
And for anybody wondering, for front-loading NESs, thanks to the Real Phoenix sending me something and me verbally abusing Voltar probably on a daily basis, we might have one of those in a month or so too. Maybe that's a little ambitious, but working on no-cut front loaders as well, because that's something that I really want.
Nobody else cares.
When does verbally abusing become verbal raping?
I've been asking that question for years, Steve. As soon as you can answer, call me. We'll call my therapist together.
All right, let's move on.
Let's get to it.
We're already
Nick,
behind.
Get into it. Get into it, Nick. Fucking stop doing this stuff and get into it.
All right, we're going to talk about this, which Eon Mark II. We all got sent these from our good friends over at Eon. So finally we have time to talk about our experiences with it. I thought I'd go first since I was the first one to actually plug it into a console instead of just ripping it open.
Steve, he's talking to you.
So my first impressions of it are this. If you take this thing and you plug it right into your console and you hook it up to a modern HD TV, great, you're going to be super happy. It works fine out of the box. However, that's not what I did. The first thing I did with it was plug it into my GameCube and then hook it in to a dual setup, because this one obviously now has the analog output on the back for a Wii cable and then the HDMI. I hooked the HDMI up to an older computer monitor from maybe like 10 years ago, and then I hooked the analog up to my CRT, and neither of those things worked right out of the box. So the problem, it turns out, is the default settings on the software are not compatible unless you first plug it into your modern HDMI television and change them. For one, what was messing up my monitor through HDMI was that enhanced DVI mode is on by default, and the reason they do that is because most people are going to plug this into an HD TV and want audio, but this thing is using fake HDMI through DVI, and so that tripped up my HDMI monitor. Couldn't get a signal on it. The CRT doesn't work directly out of the box unless you change a setting because the line doubler is on by default. So you could probably make a good argument for why having the enhanced DVI on default makes sense, because you don't want a bunch of support tickets coming in complaining that they're not getting audio. But the fact that the line doubler is on by default, I think is a bad call. This is probably an easy fix, but just something to note that, you know, my CRT is not going to take a 480p signal out of the box, and
I would actually, I think the opposite is true. I think the enhanced DVI should be off, and the line doubler should be on. The reason why the line doubler is on is because not everything supports 480i.
Yeah.
And so since they're not. So one of the reasons why this is not an HDMI compliant product is it has no communication with the display. Mm-hmm. So it can't query the display and see what it supports. It could just jam out a signal.
No EDID.
Yeah, there's no EDID.
No EDID negotiation.
So it needs, the best thing to do is always output 720 by 480p out of it, because that's a minimum supported. Everything HDMI needs to be able to support that resolution. So that's why that was chosen. I actually think if they were going to change one of the defaults, it would be the enhanced DVI, because I'm assuming their logic is they don't want to deal with support tickets on people who get no audio.
Yep.
But that's something you could put in the instruction manual to enable audio. Yeah. I mean, there's a really nice instruction manual on here. Like that, this new instruction manual is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite things on the new.
The update, yeah.
So
yeah, that was just, I wanted to give the consumer perspective there. But that's kind of probably not the most likely scenario that you're going to be hooking up to some weird display, old LCD monitor and a CRT and get screwed.
Well, don't forget
both.
The other side too. I mean, the likelihood of somebody buying this to use with analog but not having some HDMI solution to plug it into is very small. Whereas, the opposite, the amount of people that are probably buying these that might not even realize that it has dual output, they're going to be plugging it directly into. So yeah, I think that it should have been on. I have to agree with Steve on this one, but I also disagree with Steve in that I think the audio should be on, because I guarantee half the people that didn't know what that is would have opened a support ticket or just returned it. Audio doesn't work. I'm out.
Yeah, that is definitely a concern to think through. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know how many scenarios there are out there where the monitor is going to reject the enhanced DVI situation. So I mean, I guess that's a decision you gotta make. But that was just something to note from going into it without cracking it open, just plugging it in and playing the effing game. So I wanted to, but once I got that squared away, I plugged it into my HD TV, got the settings fixed, and then moved it back over to my setup. Worked pretty well, so no issues from just playing the game.
So, I got a giant list of things. Do you want me to just go over them, and then we could all talk about how because I think I have a thorough list that includes most of everybody's concerns on this.
Well, I think I was one of the first people that actually tore it down. I just really have a couple things to say about it. I don't. I must have put it back in its box. A couple of things really that sort of glaringly stuck out to me. The first was I just don't like the digital connector. I don't like the digital connector at all. I don't like this material, and I don't like the fact that even with my pinky, if I wanted to, I can literally sock puppet this, and I could have it talk to the audience. Ho, 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 people. I love the GameCube. Look at me. I'm Richard Nixon. But at any rate, I don't like this. I don't like this connector. It's some sort of nylon composite for mechanical connector. I don't think this is very good at all. When I disassembled this unit, and I'm sorry that mine isn't disassembled, I thought the routing was pretty good. The board is pretty nicely done. I don't like that there are through-hole parts soldered and sort of bodged on. I don't like, and Steve can show you a lot of this.
So this is the
thank you, Steve.
through-hole parts.
I don't like that at all. I do appreciate the fact that they've got a little piece
Pull
of
back
material.
a little, Steve.
Well, he's just got to manually focus it in. I don't know, but I do appreciate the fact that when Steve brings that back up, those through-hole parts lay over the IC, and they did sort of.
I got it on my camera.
Oh, thank you, Nick. God bless you. They do have the courtesy of putting some insulative material down so that those through-hole components probably won't short to the IC. Another thing that I really was bothered with, if you're looking at Nick's picture, the multi-out. The multi-out that they use, which is the analog output that sort of jams to the system, it's only carrying audio. But the footprint for this is not a 90-degree panel mount or a PCB mount connector. It's a straight shot, right? So they've bodged the multi-out's audio. That works actually pretty good, Steve. They have bodged the audio pins into the main board, and I'm sorry, for $150, this is a pretty shitty solution for somebody or for a company that's making and marketing an $150 product. I was really disappointed to see this. I mean, this is like
normally you would have wanted like essentially for the wires to be mounted coming up. I can't really show it. I'm not going to get a good focus, but essentially you'd have all the pins coming up and going in there, or how would it look?
So the issue is that this is intended to be made with a custom SNES connector, but they took ones made that are in the cables. Like if you're making a SNES cable, there's this type of connector where it's supposed to go straight out. It's a cable mount. It just goes straight out the back. But what they did is they took this little black piece off of it.
Yeah, it's hard.
I don't know if I. There we go. So this
that looks really good.
There's a little black piece slides off, and then they bent the bottom row of pins down to a 90 degree, and they left just the one single pin on the top that they needed to stick out the back where it's supposed to. All the pins normally stick out the back, but then they just have this one stick out the back, and then they slid this black piece back on, so it's not on all the way because of those bent pins underneath are stopping it from going in all the way.
Yeah, okay, I see that. Yep.
So then they have a little wire that just goes down, and I guess that was just to avoid getting a custom connector made, but it's not. It's
really bad, and it's so bad, and because this SNES N64 multi-out is soldered by hand. I don't know if you can see this, but it is not plumb and coming straight out. It's actually skewed. It's actually not like this, but it's tilted up. And so the problem that I have
is it like that on yours, Steve? Because it's not tilting up on mine.
A little bit.
Well, it's so bad on mine that I cannot insert this. Well, if I know how to put it in, ooh, Daddy, I cannot insert this square. There's always I don't know if you can even see this on camera, but there's always going to be this gap, and it never fully seats. And if I do try to fully seat it, look, it comes out the other side. This is me trying to put it in with even pressure. It won't go, and that's simply because this SNES connector is not squared up. It's pointing up. And other than that, I don't like that the Wii. Steve says that he sees a 40, or maybe it was Renee that said he saw a 45 on there. I don't like that the Wii connector or the Wii male or female port here. I don't see a 45-degree bevel, and on top of that, I don't think this has got hard gold flashing on the contacts. I think this is just ENIG.
So yeah, Zach, I'm gonna say mine exhibits the same problem that you're mentioning. There's definitely a difference in angle, maybe like 5 to 10 degrees.
Right.
And no, mine doesn't have a bevel either. It's straight board edge. So
Mine
I'm not the one
looks
who said that.
mine looks like it was manually beveled.
Yeah,
very slightly.
Same on mine. Yeah, I can see like kind of a triangle shape on there. But yeah, it does look like it was manually done.
And so I have to be really careful when I put this in any. I have 4 or 5 GameCubes here, and unless I put it in just right, I get there are problems. It doesn't work properly, so I have to be really careful with how I seat this thing, because Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Steve, you can take it from there. That's all I have to say. I'm sorry if I monopolized your time. Touch me.
Well, throw it to Renee first.
Throw it to Renee. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, I only have a few things to say because I mean I have the GameCube component cables and it's all hooked up and whatnot. So I didn't actually try out the device, but I did plug it in and just to see how it fit. So the first thing I noticed is compared to the Eon Mark One, I guess in retrospect, the Mark II fits much better, right? The Mark One was a really tight fit, and you had to yank it out of there, the GameCube, to actually pull it out. So
I found the same thing on mine. I didn't have the fit problems Exact did. It fit better than my Mark One for sure. Because when I first tried the Mark One, like I put a ton of pressure and to flip the thing on, and it didn't work at first, and I didn't realize like you really had to wait for that click on the first model, and this one worked right away, so it wasn't.
Maybe I'm just a fluke then. Maybe I'm just a fluke.
The other thing I noticed, and
we know that,
and Zach already mentioned it, is the digital multi-out is extremely mushy. Like I can get both ends to actually touch without applying that much pressure. I thought that was really weird. So actually I sent Eon a message. I contacted them and I asked them about that, and I took a picture. I said, your connector is really mushy. It doesn't feel right. And this is what they answered. They said that they upgraded the plug with ballistic nylon so that it can actually connect better to the digital AV port. They said people wanted a nice fit, so they tested a bunch of different materials, and that's the one that worked out the best for them.
So this is how they solved the problem of it fitting way too tight, even though I think that probably their fake multi-out was also an issue in that on the previous model, right?
Well, it's different, right? If you look at both.
Yeah, it's too big.
Yeah, the top notch is much bigger on the Mark One than it is on the Mark II.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem why it's harder to.
If they would have kept the same digital connector, it may have been a better solution.
Yeah,
because they've already changed this.
And
anyway.
the other difference you'll see is the there are notches in the digital AV now, in the plastic. I don't know if that adds durability or strength.
Well, it's supposed to. So here's a connector that fits really well.
Okay.
It's here. I don't know if I could get it to focus.
Perfect.
But this is like an exact replica of the official GameCube cable, and it's got the notches on the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's what they're trying to do. There's like these clips on the mating connector that are supposed to latch on.
So they're trying to replicate that.
So yeah, they're trying to replicate that so it gets a better retention force, even though the retention force wasn't really a problem, I guess. But I did notice, like, whoever did the modeling on the notches, like one of them is slightly off, like it doesn't match up 100%. I don't think it's a big problem because the clips are narrower than the notches, so it'll still fit in the notches. I just thought it was a sloppy design.
Well, I mean, when you're looking at the digital connector, and I'm sorry, I don't have the focus that the rest of these champions do, but this is not me being super critical. I think you can get a pretty good view of this, actually, the way I'm holding it. Jesus Christ, I'm not being funny. I thought they were cutting these out from the factory with an X-Acto knife.
No, those dents are from those divots.
The casts?
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
I think so.
I don't think so.
I don't know where my... Oh, there it is.
I don't think that's. I mean, maybe you're right.
I was trying to figure out that too, if that's just an optical illusion caused by those little clip things, and I think it is. I had to pop this thing off, and it's really hard to get back on, so it's still disconnected. But yeah, I think it's straighter than it actually looks because of those divots.
I mean, to sort of summarize my points, 80% of my criticisms are just in the connectors. I mean, the device appears to work just fine, but I'm sorry if this were $75, if this were $80 in this form factor in the state that it's in, I'd be less critical. But $150 for the things that I see, for the unit that I received, I don't see $150 of worth here. Now, I'm not being rude. I'm just being very honest. For $150, I would expect more proper tooling, and I think that's fair to say.
And how much does the Carby go for?
$75.
Okay, yeah.
But it's HDMI only.
Yeah.
So if you want their analog solution, you have to buy two, which is now you're talking the same thing.
And you're not going to get dual. You won't be able to.
Steve, are you done with your list?
No, not even close.
I didn't even start. I didn't start.
Hold
I didn't start my list. At all.
I'm just saying, I'm shutting up. I had said everything I needed to say. Video looks really
10
great.
minutes ago.
Bob, please, again, you're monopolizing this conversation. I've said everything that those are all my criticisms, and touch me in my naughty places. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Steve.
Go ahead, Steve. Jesus,
Oh.
Steve, pay attention. That haircut's went to your brain.
I'll be mute, Zach.
Okay, so I'll just go over, like, it's kind of a long list because I found a lot of issues with this. First of all, this new case feels really cheap. Like, the plastic on it's much less quality than Mark 1 or the first one, I guess. The
Mark 1 plastic is really nice.
Yeah, super nice.
The way it's designed to hold the digital connector, it barely holds it together, and the reason why you probably want something that holds it better is because this can easily happen to your digital connector. The thing just comes off.
Jesus.
Yeah,
well, if this thing's closed, that won't happen.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. If it's closed, it barely prevents it from happening.
Yeah.
It's on like one side. It's holding this thing in, like just on.
Well, I gave it a pretty hard tug when this thing was closed, and I couldn't do anything. But as soon as I took the case off, it comes off with ease.
But my point is, the case doesn't do a good enough job holding that in. The case screws, because you could take it apart, right? The case screws are the wrong screws. They're using screws for machined threads, but you need to use plastic thread form screws, which is on all of like a SNES or any type of plastic shell that we've been using in this retro gaming. Even the GameCube itself uses it's either thread cutting or thread forming screw, and the thread is much different than what is on here. And already, like, the plastic bosses are worn out. I think after the first or second time, like, I could just push the screw into.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that too. I wouldn't be able to screw both screws back in. Although I don't think they're strictly necessary. I could probably use this without having any screws in there because of the way it clips together. But yeah, I guess you call them bosses. I never heard that terminology, but the screw holes is totally busted on one of them, so I would not be able to re-screw on mine either.
Self-tapping screws is what Steve's referring to.
Yeah, like if you go to McMaster Car, they're called thread forming screws. This Wii part, the Wii connector part on the casing, is misaligned for the center of the PCB edge. So when you plug in a connector, the pins are slightly offset from the optimal position. And I did an analysis to make sure, like, if anything shorted, if there'd be a problem, but luckily nothing bad will short out. If it's a it's hard to explain, but like
if there's a shift in pins.
Yeah, because the way the cable goes in, where the pins line up, because the mechanical hole is offset from where the PCB is, the pins in the cable part wouldn't land directly on the pads of the PCB. If that makes it more clear.
Yeah.
And then these little retention clips here, we talked about them on the GameCube side. One of these is way off center. It doesn't even clip in to the Wii connector, because the Wii cable that goes in here has two little holes on the top for these to lock in and have good retention. So only one of these matches up. The other one is whoever designed it did screwed up. Then, yeah, we talked about the analog connector. The digital connector, we talked about. On the Wii connector on the board, like Zach mentioned, is definitely not hard gold plating. And one of the clues you can see is that the solder mask is existent all over this connector, like in between the pads and everything. They can't do a hard gold process with the solder mask in that area. Like you usually have to pull down the solder mask up to this point to be able to do something like that. The other thing is that the gold or the pads are too far to the board edge, and so when they did the bevel on mine and Nick's,
snapped them.
It cut into the copper, so I have exposed copper on the edges here, because the pads are way too far to the board edge.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I didn't know if that was going to be for everybody. If it's a manual, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry,
So
Steve.
in addition to a bevel, you want a chamfer on here. Like, you see how these are like hard corners? You kind of want a little chamfer that matches the bevel, so you have a three-dimensional.
Well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it's poor implementation of this board edge. And then also I noticed that the two of these pins are connected here in the edge finger area, which was weird. Other stuff, there was a bunch of flux residue on my Wii connector pads, which I cleaned off. Yeah, because the board isn't cleaned very well. There's flux in a lot of places. It looks like it was attempted to be cleaned, but like it's kind of just smeared over to this area. So I don't know if that would have caused anything before I cleaned it, any issues. But like some minor things, circuit-wise, is that I noticed that the headphone jack and the audio on the Wii connector, they're directly shorted together. I mean, I would have preferred to have like some sort of resistor in between them just to make sure
one doesn't feed back into the other.
Yeah. The last thing I noticed is I took all the GameCube video solutions and I tested the 5-volt output. So to be a compliant device in DVI and HDMI, is the source is supposed to be able to supply 55 milliamps of current out the 5-volt port. And what that means is even if you have 55 milliamps, 55 milliamp load on the output, that you still get around like 4.7 volts. Like that's like the minimum. And none of these solutions do that. Actually, if you put...
Do they droop really bad?
It goes down to like a volt. So
my God.
So all of these solutions, like you could barely get a milliamp out of them without it. I think it was a milliamp. I put a 4.7K load on the output. And the reason why is, at least with the Mark II, and it happened with this too, they're all based on the same circuit, which is like a GCHD Shuriken Video or something, and the schematic on that has a 5-volt regulator and then a series 180 ohm resistor. I mean, I think it would have been better to maybe put a PTC fuse in line, because instead of like this linear ramp where as the load increases your voltage drops, you have more of like a cutoff, like a sharper cutoff.
Right.
So you can set it around like 100 milliamps, so you could still get the required minimum up to 55 milliamps. I mean, it did perform better than we talked about this on the first GCHD, the Zener diode. Like, they use the Zener diode regulator for the 5 volts.
Right.
And I mentioned I didn't like that. Well, it's because this problem here is even worse on the Mark 1 because of using a Zener diode solution. So,
right.
I mean, yeah, we already mentioned before that, you're not going to get full HDMI compliance out of this thing. And in this case, with the 5 volts, like, I don't even think you get DVI compliance. So,
hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Well, when you get done, tell me when you're done. I want you to hold when you can hold the board back up and show the analog multi-out connector, because I was going to actually show something real quick. So, like, as you can see, Steve's holding the multi-out connector, and what we were talking about before, just to sort of illustrate this better, is I'm going to hold it up. This is just an empty SNES plug. And what they have done is they've just bought a lot of these off of Alibaba or somewhere. And if you take this apart, inside is this piece. And simply what they have done is they've just simply bent these pins down to a 90-degree.
Well, they took that piece off first.
Well, yeah, they take this. Yeah, I'm sorry. They take this plastic piece that I'm holding, and they pull it back. And after they pull it back, that's when they do a 90 and they bend these down, and then they manipulate the connector to sort of bodge it in. I had one here, so I thought we could really illustrate precisely what they did, and I just wanted to show that. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Thank you for your time.
I'm pretty much done with the hardware. The only things software-wise was what Nick mentioned, and then also I did notice something weird. I guess it's just something with GC Video itself. If you notice on that TV, I have 2 pieces of tape, and that's where the width of the actual component cable, official GameCube component cable, lined up. And then when I plug in the GCHD, it's that right piece of tape. The picture only goes up to like an inch from it. So for some reason, it's a little shrunk.
Huh.
Versus.
Finally, Steve shows some tech that I understand. Good job.
So I don't know what the scoop is with that, but I think it happens just because something with the GCHD, or not GC Video.
Are you saying that there's an aspect ratio discrepancy?
That's what it looked like to me, yeah.
Oh, boy.
But it's very minor. I mean, it's like maybe a half an inch from that right piece of tape.
Half an inch can mean the world to some people, Steve.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
I know you.
Oh, but other than that, like, the analog video quality is really spot on. Like, I measured the component levels, and they're pretty much dead on. The only thing I noticed is the My Life in Game video said that the official component cable was too dark. The official component cable was even more spot on than out of here. So I don't know what was going on there with their testing. I did not have that problem with the official. Those were spot on.
Interesting.
So I opened it up while you were talking, and everything you mentioned is on mine as well. Except I even have flux on top of the digital connector. I don't know how that got there, but and Voltar was talking about how his how the SNES multi-out was angled up, but now that I've opened it, I'm seeing that my SNES AV connector is actually parallel to the board, but it's actually the multi-out that's angled up pretty significantly too.
I'm sorry, I'm confused, Renee. When you say the multi-out, what are you referring to specifically?
So the SNES type connector on here, the one which carries only audio, is the one that is, if I look at it like this, it's parallel to the PCB.
Okay.
The digital connector is angled up significantly.
Oh, I see. Okay. You confused me because you said multi, but I got you.
Yeah, which sounds like the reverse of what you said.
Yes, it is. That is the inverse. That is the inverse of what I said. That's interesting.
Yeah, my digital has a slight angle up to it as well, but my multi-out is parallel.
Yeah, and I see a slight bevel on the AV on the Wii out now that I've opened it, and like Steve said, it exposed copper.
Yes. Okay.
So it's not a fluke that you saw that on yours.
So like the reason why my list was kind of long and detailed, I just wanted to highlight Zach's point that he made earlier, is that this is advertised as like a high quality, and the production quality I think went down from the Mark I or the first one. And that's kind of weird. It seems kind of backwards because when they're first starting out, they're trying to
start a company.
First product, they're learning the ropes, trying to figure things out, and then the next one should be even better, more spot on, right? And it seems like everything was the other direction. And like you said, I mean, it does do new things compared to the first one, but if you're paying $150, this is not $150 worth of quality.
No, not at all. I would not recommend it.
Especially when you know that this, even though I have a big gripe about this stupid regulator inside here, that's it over. I mean, I hate this, but this connector fits perfectly, and there's no issue with it.
I don't have one. I would have loved to have reviewed one, and just to reiterate, we're not paid to talk about these. These were given to us, and we're being is very transparent and honest. I mean, some people think that if somebody gives you something, you've automatically got to kiss its ass, and I'm sorry. I've got to be honest when we talk about this stuff. It's just...
Well, I think anybody that's ever seen 2 seconds of any of our videos knows that we're not the people that you get to buy the review from. So,
and I
don't think that's what Eon wanted at all.
No, they never said anything to us to indicate that that's how they felt. So
nope.
So overall, right? Overall, you guys' opinion is that it's not bad. It's just doesn't justify the money.
If it were $80, I would buy it and I would recommend it. And for $150, I'm sorry, with all due respect, I can't recommend it. I can't recommend the lack of polish on this to anybody for $150.
So I have a couple of questions that are some are very relevant, some might annoy you. But first and foremost, will this cause damage to your GameCube or your TV or monitor?
No, I don't think so.
The only thing that had risk was the offset pins.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, and then like My Life in Gaming asked me to look at that because I mentioned that to them, and so I spent an hour like looking which pins could get crossed and stuff, and there was no risk of that, and it was because the official Wii pins were a little wider than like aftermarket pins, and everybody's using the aftermarket pins, so they're narrower, so there was less chance. So it turned out that won't happen. Nothing bad would happen because of that, and that was the only thing at risk of something being damaged.
And for things like the ENIG instead of hard gold, that's going to wear down the adapter, not your cables.
Right? Even then, you're talking even with an ENIG finish on the connector there, the plating. Mm-hmm. I don't see that as if you cycle that thing 1,000 times, you might run into some problems. But I look at this as it's best practice to hard gold flash that, but ultimately it should be for $150. Let me say this.
Well, so the thing is, hard gold wouldn't have been that much more expensive, right?
Maybe $1.50 to the size of the board. Sure.
That's frustrating.
That
but-
really annoyed me.
That could have been a mistake too, right, by the factory.
No fucking way.
I don't think so.
no.
I don't think so.
You don't
Sorry.
think so?
No.
So I
don't.
gotta stay on just because I think people in the chat think that we're stringing this thing up and roasting it on fire. I gotta stay with good guy, which means you guys better fucking let me be bad guy for the next topic. But I think the last question I gotta ask is, and this is serious. This is not facetious. I'm not fucking around. How much is good marketing worth to us as retro gamers, especially people as retro gamers who make stuff? I mean, I don't make parts. I make videos and posts because Eon's done a pretty good job at all of these trade shows, spending money in the right places, making people aware of this thing that would have never been aware of it before. And that trickles down to everybody. That means Insurrection could sell this badass little thing for $75, spend zero money on advertising.
Yeah, so that's, I think, where it becomes a bigger issue that the thing is still $150 and some of the production quality has suffered, is that now they've got competitors who are going to piggyback off of people knowing that this stuff is out there now. They don't have the market for I mean, I guess Eon kind of had Zelda X Pro out there, but I don't even consider that a real thing.
No,
but now they have
exposing YouTubers for how shitty they actually are. That's all Zelda did for us. But continue.
Now they have a real competitor out there, so I mean, it's just something to keep in mind. The marketing, I agree with you 100%. Like that some of that stuff was necessary, getting out to the trade shows and doing all the right things, but they're gonna have to justify the cost of keeping this thing at 150. So I mean, to go back to what you said about being the good guy, I'm trying to do a little bit of that too, because I don't really hate this product. I mean, I think for your consumer who doesn't care about these tiny details, not going to be relevant to almost anybody.
I agree.
They're going to plug it in. They're going to be happy with their $150 purchase. This video should be more taken as, here's a list of things to go get right if you do another production run of it. These are changes that they can start making. Maybe they're not going to make all of them, but list of things.
If it's come off, if I don't know if Steve or Renee's comments, but if my comments have come off rather caustic, I would like to reiterate that I don't think that it's an absolutely horrible device. I just don't think that it's $150 worth of device. And if it was sold any less than that, $90, maybe even $100, I wouldn't be so critical. So it's not that I want to deter people from buying it. It's just that personally, there are a lot of hangups that I'm just not cool with for $150. Doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean it's great. The video output's phenomenal. I'm just talking about really mechanical and finish issues with the body and the device. That's where my criticisms start and really stop.
I think
so. The only point that I want to make sure that we all make then is we've a lot of times in the past few years talked about products that people have spun in a creative way, but everybody needs to run away from and should not use for both safety reasons and it ruins the experience. And I don't count this as one of them.
No.
Oh no, absolutely
Yeah,
not. This is not something anyone should be fearful of. It's
as long as we're clear about that.
Yes, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think my summary is I have a hard time saying that this is a professional quality product.
You're right. That's right.
That's how I'd summarize it.
Yeah, I mean, some of those issues with that are less concerning than others. Like the screw thing, most people shouldn't be unscrewing this thing anyway, so
yeah,
whoop-de-doo.
Yeah,
The fact that the plastic's a little cheaper than the old one, I mean, that's just a aesthetics thing, really. Like, who cares? But yeah, some of the circuit issues with the solder mask and the alignments, those are stuff that I think we all agree should be fixed on future runs. So anyway, let's move on from this topic because we got other things to talk about. Unless anyone else has final words.
No, I think Bob made it clear. It's not a device that we advocate people running from or that people should be afraid of. It's just it's got some issues. Leave it at that.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so next topic I have on the list is something that really distracted from my Magfest experience on Friday because my Twitter was blowing up with this garbage. Pound released their SNES cable through limited run games.
I'm sorry, Nick, by the way, for that. That's pretty much, you're pretty much talking about me, aren't you, you sick bastard?
No, it was a lot of tweets where I just got tagged in from people saying, "Hey, limited run games, go check out HD Retrovision," which they know about us. I've talked to Josh a million times, so it's not like they don't know who we are. But people kept saying that to them, so then I would see all the replies to that forever. But
that bullshit wasted an hour of my fucking day.
Yeah, so. Who wants to give the summary of the main issue?
Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
Can I please? So I want to be clear about my thoughts on limited run games. They're a company that started out and made their way by catering to collectors, who's not me, but they're honest. They're honest people who are not trying to scam anybody. I like them. I like the company. And when they used the money that they made and they used the springboard to then make physical copies for everybody, not just collectors, I think they've done a great job as that as well. They're not perfect, neither am I, whatever, mistakes happen. But overall, I'm a fan of the company. I like what they do. But I used this example a few times, and I'm going to say it again. Those guys who are now masters at dealing with the politics and bullshit of taking a digital-only game and putting it on a hard copy, have now jumped into something that they don't know a single thing about. That would be exactly like me in this podcast giving a dancing lesson. It was embarrassing to watch, and the fact that Josh has no idea why he's doing everybody a disservice was really disheartening. I contacted him privately. I was a douchebag publicly. I couldn't help it. These things bother me. And the bottom line is, and everybody else will elaborate, but they're shilling a cable that's filled with lag, that does a terrible job. It's just it's ruining an experience. You'd get a much better experience getting a SNES Classic. Whereas things where I don't really like the Pound Dreamcast cable, you're not ruining your experience. It doesn't add lag. It doesn't destroy everything. You plug it in and it's meh. It's perfectly meh. So I have no problem with cheap solution. I'm not an elitist that's only chasing the best. I would love for somebody to come up with a cheap plug-and-play solution that does not ruin everything. And the only other thing that makes this so much worse is the psychology behind people that once they buy something, they feel personally offended if anybody else says that the thing that they bought isn't good, rather than just being like, "Oh, bought the wrong thing."
Well, it's the psychology of
worse.
That's the psychology of a consumer having to protect their investment and justify their investment, and you see that all the time.
Well, let's get into what the issue was with their actual marketing of the thing. Sorry, I missed that.
I missed it too. I'm sorry.
Say it again, Renee.
It's called endowment.
Oh. I love it because I'm endowed.
Anyhow, the marketing issue of this thing was that it was, I mean, in the description, it was kind of sold as this higher end product. And one of the really bad things that was posted and really annoyed everyone, not just us, was the basis for comparison to this thing was like, here's your $30 pound cable. This is what you get out of it. And look at how much better, even though it wasn't that much better, it is than the FrameMeister $330 solution, by the way, plugged in with a composite cable. Which,
oh, Jesus Christ.
It's just a horrible basis of comparison, and it's just used to inflate the price on the right side of that image. So that was kind of deceptive, I felt.
Oh, that was horribly. That was remarkably deceptive. And when I saw this, I immediately tweeted, and I can pull the tweet up here. I said, it's incredibly disappointing to see something like this from @LimitedRunGames. And then I took a screenshot because at the time I was enterprising enough to think to screenshot their sales page for this. And like you said, Nick, there's a picture of the shitty pound cable, Turtles in Time, directly running against a quote-unquote $350 FrameMeister, that's what they said they're advertising, connected via composite. That was strike one for me. I'm like, well, boy, that's disingenuous. The second strike was the subtext of that sales page. And what I screened actually says things like excellent RGB video quality. Well, we can all agree that some things are objective and some things are subjective, but the way the listing initially read was totally swindling in its language and in nature. And for limited run games to even benignly run something like that, I don't know how these things don't come across your head, but I found it to be incredibly disappointing. I feel like all of us here contribute greatly to educating people about high fidelity video and getting a lot of these legacy analog video outputs to interface with 21st century technology. And all of the hard work that all of us collectively do, when we take 2 steps forward, it just takes bullshit like this to set us 30 steps back. And it was never an argument of being at war against affordable, family budget-friendly devices. It was a war against swindling, deceptive language and really shitty sales practices under the guise of selling something, saying it is something that it really isn't. And that's what I took issue with. And I had a bit of an online exchange with, I guess, Josh, and I don't think he understands that. And I still don't think he quite understands that.
He still doesn't. In talking with him personally, he definitely still doesn't understand any of what's going on.
Yeah, it's a shame because I really like them as a company. Like half my PS4 library is limited run games, but and like you said, I really don't have an issue with there being budget solutions out there other than these guys are all cheating with the HDMI thing. So go fuck themselves anyway. But yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say on this was people were giving Metal Jesus a lot of hate, which I thought was unfounded.
Yeah, for once, completely unfounded.
The dude got a review unit. He did a video on it, and he wasn't that like psyched up about it. You know,
he was very lukewarm about it.
Yeah, he was lukewarm. He's like, okay, I plugged this in. I get my HDMI. It works. The colors are clearly off. He noticed that. The only thing he didn't really do was lag testing, but so I would have liked to see him just, throw up a Super Mario. And
he doesn't know what that is. But the point is, he didn't just show the product.
I think he knows what it is.
I really don't think he does.
He really doesn't.
I think
anyway.
Bob said, doesn't matter. The point is,
I think his review was fine. I don't think he came off as a shill at all, so I don't know why. I don't know if people just didn't watch his video and wanted to give him hate, but I thought it was a perfectly fine review of the product from a consumer perspective. That's all I wanted to say.
I thought the review was pretty crappy, actually. Not because it's a crappy product, but whenever you're gonna measure, or whenever you're going to do a review, on the basis of a piece of technology that is supposed to help with the video in Videoland. I mean, there are certain bases that you just have to cover. And if you're not going to cover those bases, you ought not talk about it at all. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of things that happened in that video that just kind of bothered me. The fact that it wasn't even mentioned that those cables are outputting a interlaced image was pretty disturbing. Secondly, the input latency, I wish that was talked about, because input latency is just as integral as the quality of the video, in my opinion. It can look great, but if you're going to get 40 frames, if I can go to 7-Eleven back faster than the next frame renders, I mean, we've got a problem here, Houston. So I thought the video was pretty. The review, in the spirit of a review, it was crap. But ultimately, it's these companies spring out of nowhere, or they've lasted for 10 or 15 years. And we've talked about this before, especially in sort of like the clone markets, how they continue to perpetuate themselves and to thrive in business. It's because you have companies. Jesus fucking, what the hell's going on?
That was me.
Fucking A. But you have these companies that have survived on the vehicle of YouTubers doing faux reviews. I'm not saying Metal Jesus Rocks video was a quote unquote faux review, but let's be honest. I would quantify 80% of the reviews you see for these cables, these clone consoles, not necessarily being bought and paid for, but they're certainly swayed. And that's what keeps this engine, it's what continues this propagation of junk. And this is why good retro tech usually takes a second or back seat. And the shitty Hyperkin stuff, and yes, I'm sorry, no offense, Hyperkin makes really shitty products more often than they make good products. Other than their controllers, I'm speaking from personal experience, it doesn't matter. Those companies always take the front seat, and it's unfortunate that other companies, they don't get the same spotlight because they don't have either they don't have the funding to send these units out to everybody, or they don't have the pockets to maybe incentivize these videos for other people to make. It's just the world we live in, and I think people just need to wake up. That's all. Go on, Nick. I know you're wanting to intersex.
Oh, I was just gonna say I thought it was funny because Ryan from Castlevania posted some games from the pictures from the Hyperkin booth, and now they've got the SNES cable coming out too, which I'm sure is the same. They also got some 8-bit clone controllers that they're releasing. It looks like so.
I'm pretty sure Hyperkin took what LCD mod, the dude from Russia who's doing all those Zapper patches. I think they took that ROM. I think they opened Lunar IPS and did the reverse, so they know exactly what was done to it. And I think that's what their new Zapper product is stole.
Well, we don't have evidence for that, but it'll be interesting.
We'll see. We'll see. That's my bet.
It's anecdotal at best, but the point is what we talked about when we talked about clone consoles and the way those things continue to thrive is applicable to exactly what you see today, and that's why it's just kind of disheartening. I don't mean to whine about it, but all the strides that we take to further promote this stuff, I just feel we get deprived of so much because, well, this jerk off here has 100,000 subscribers and he talks about it and what he says is contrary, and we kind of get left in the dust. And I don't know, it's just I wish we had a better means, a better vector, I guess, to penetrate people's anuses. And second to that, I just wanted to say, and this isn't a George Soros joke, I kind of wish it was, but no, I'm not going to say that. But do you guys disagree with what I'm saying? And
no, I agree 100%.
Before I sort of go off on another diatribe, I wanted to give Nick an opportunity. You said they cheat. Now, can you provide context to that? I don't understand what you meant when you said they cheat. So fuck, I believe, quote unquote, fuck them. Fuck them.
None of these guys are licensed by HDMI, and none of their products would pass compliance testing to begin with. So.
Okay, you need to get really specific, Nick, because those are some seriously tall allegations. And I'm not even kidding.
And
so
nobody
you're saying,
cares about at all.
No, I mean, yeah, I get it, Bob. You don't care, but these guys are without. I feel like we've already gone into this, but
have we talked about licensing and all of this in terms
to use
of
HDMI? You're supposed to be licensed, which means you pay a fee, which means those of us that do it properly are covering your fees for you when you decide to cheat the system and buy some chips off of AliExpress and slap them on your product, and then don't do the compliance testing that's required for you to, tell people that you're selling an HDMI product. That's what these companies are doing. That's why I pointed out that, they're not slapping HDMI logos on their thing, because that would just add another level of risk for them. Anyway, we don't have to get into that. That's a whole nother.
Okay, well, I mean, you said it without articulating, so I'm glad you did. But
I think to justify Nick's claim, we tested the Pound PS1, PS2 cables, which use the same architecture as all these new ones, which always spit 720p out of them. And the way a compliant HDMI device would work is like we discussed with the GCHD, the EDID communication, the communication from the source of the display to query the display. Hey, what can you display? are you a HDMI device or a DVI device? That type of communication is supposed to happen before you can send 720p out the port. It needs to verify that the display can handle 720p. And so what I did is I cut the communication lines, and the thing is still spitting out 720p. Per the HDMI specification, you're supposed to only output 480p until you can query the display and find out that it does 720p. So that's what Nick is getting, that it won't pass compliance testing. That's like one of the factors. And so I just wanted to clarify.
I understand. You took the cables and you ripped the EDID. You ripped the EDID all out. You ripped the EDID out altogether, and it was still shitting out 720.
Yeah.
It was still okay. So yeah, okay,
and
okay,
and audio.
And audio
you're
too.
Not supposed to do audio until you can verify.
I'll tell you guys something that I've really not talked about, and we talk about a lot of stuff in my private chambers. I've not even talked to Bob about this, which is remarkable. But I was actually told a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of told this before, but I was told this by somebody else. Actually, this wasn't a couple of weeks ago. This was just a few days ago after I made a certain response to this whole pound cable thing. Someone said to me that there are a lot of quote-unquote big YouTubers that are effectively blackballing you because you're not playing by the rules, and you're not going with the majority vote here. And I'm not going to mention names because the person who said this is actually a pretty decent person, and I would never betray their confidence. But I think that was a really interesting thing for him to say. So this may sound kind of conspiratorial, and I'm not kidding. I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but there are no jokes. It's going to be really conspiratorial, but do you think that these YouTubers, like, they sit around, they coordinate, and they say, okay, this guy, this Voltar is saying all the wrong things. He's fucking with our money. Don't talk to him. Don't have any interaction with him. He's blackballed from all of us, unless his tune changes. This is pretty much what was conveyed to me.
I could answer that with 99.9% certainty here. No, they're not organized enough to get their own videos up properly, so that's definitely not happening.
Okay.
But I guarantee you that how that falls down the ladder is somebody says, hey, who else should we send these to? That guy Voltar, he just had like over 1 million hits on that one video. He's great at electronics. Should we send it to him? And 2 or 3 of them separately probably went, ooh, I don't know. He's always mean to me on Twitter. And that's it. You're blackballed whether you absolutely didn't even realize it.
Well, it's a delightful thing that I give absolutely 0.0 shits about that. But I just think it's a remarkable reflection of what we're talking about, because it's almost like I think that there has been a YouTube pseudo-political system that has formed. I don't know. I just think that
I think George Soros and Peter Thiel are funding it all, personally.
I think that money has taken precedent, obviously, over all this, because I'm not saying that YouTube can't be a full job, but let's face it, everybody wants to make YouTube a career, and so whatever makes that revenue happen is lucrative, and unfortunately, a lot of people, get masturbated in a bad way because of that.
Well, here's the thing that really bothers me, right? I get, an insane amount of emails and messages from people that just really want to get something that works for them. And I know a lot of people, a lot of people that have, they make good money, they have lives, they have families and children, and they say, okay, well, my monthly allowance to myself is this, and they stick to it because that's an easy rabbit hole to get down. And at the end of the day, it's like they just spent $30 on something that is completely useless. Completely. Sure. Where if they knew about this, they could have, all right, well, let me just wait another month and then get the $100 thing, or it just, to them it's heartbreaking because it's like, shit, this is garbage. And things like, I gotta say, the Pound X Dreamcast, and there's another competitor, they sent me one. They stopped responding to me when I said, hey, by the way, this thing doesn't do 480i. You said it did. Am I missing something? They refused to respond to me after that. I've tried to contact them 3 or 4 times. So whatever it is, funny thing, for $25, it's fine. It doesn't have any lag. It's not good, but it's not bad.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that in my opinion is totally cool. It's the opposite. The PS2 pound cable, the SNES pound cable, and the hyper shit, whatever that thing is. Oh my god, I don't even want to see it. It's just gonna make me angry. I'm sure it's the same thing from the same factory.
Yeah, so
So
before we move on, I just wanted to say, like, my issue, I guess, here, kind of piggybacking off what you said, is someone might pick up this cheap solution, and this might be the type of person who had their console, like, sitting in their attic, and they pull it out, and, you know, they just want to start playing again. They need something to hook it up to their HD TV, and they use this, and they're like, wow, this sucks. I don't want to deal with this anymore, and they just put it away and kind of give up. Like, that, I think that's a very plausible scenario where the quality was just kind of crappy enough to make it not worth continuing along this hobby anymore.
That's right.
And they're not going
That's
to,
right.
you know, spend 40 hours reading forums to figure out the right way to do things. Anyway, Renee's got some cool stuff that he wanted to talk about Game Gear on a Sega Genesis.
God damn it.
was Hyperkin making the Game Gear adapter? Fuck you, Renee.
No, it's so this came about I think it was about a week ago. I saw a tweet, someone claiming that someone in their employment was working on getting Game Gear games to run on Genesis. And I thought, yeah, this sounds like a really cool idea. But then after thinking about it for just a few seconds, I started seeing a whole bunch of limitations almost, you know, immediately in my head. So I decided to look at this issue a bit more closely to see if this was in fact possible, just from my understanding of the hardware. So I think what they're referring to here is they want to make like a Super Game Boy type device, or a ROM enabled device that in any way would let you run a Game Gear game natively on Genesis. And I see a whole bunch of problems with this. Number one issue is the color, right? So I'm going to go over a lot of issues here. Number one issue is the color. The Game Gear uses two 16 color palettes from possible 4,096 colors. That's 12 bits of color. The Genesis uses 4 palettes total, but it can only display them from possible 512 colors. That's 9 bits of color, right? There is shadow highlight mode on Genesis, which gives you like about 1,000 or so different colors, but that's not feasible, and it gets you nowhere near the required 12-bit depth to reproduce the Game Gear colors faithfully. But that's the number one issue. Number two issue is sound. Is the Genesis has the same PSG programmable sound generator as the Master System does. The Game Gear uses a slightly enhanced version of this PSG, which allows the PSG channels to be assigned to either left, right, or center channels. So the Game Gear has stereo audio. The Master System and Genesis do not. So, I mean, you could, in theory, just always do the audio mono if you were going to use the Genesis hardware to reproduce Game Gear audio, but it wouldn't be faithful, right? It would be mono. It would not be stereo. I assume if you're making a Super Game Gear type device, you could theoretically inject audio into the cartridge port like the 32X does, or the FM power base. So I guess you could get around that limitation by generating the audio on cartridge and not relying on the Genesis hardware. So it's an issue, but you can work around it. So then I thought, well, people will ask, surely, isn't the Game Gear in fact just a portable Master System? And the Genesis supports Master System mode, right? So can't you just do this? Well, yes, kind of. The Game Gear is kind of a portable Master System, but it's also different enough that identical code can't run on both platforms, right? There needs to be some differences. So what are those differences? What if someone were trying to exploit the Sega Master System mode on Genesis to run Game Gear games? I think this would be impossible. So people have been successfully running Game Gear games on Master System, and by extension on Genesis SMS mode, right? But those games need to be pretty extensively hacked in order to work, and here's why. Number one issue is the start button. The Game Gear has a start button, and the Master System doesn't. The pause button on Master System is in fact connected directly to the non-maskable interrupt pin of the Z80 CPU, the NMI pin. And it's not handled at all like the other gamepad buttons on the Master System. It's completely different.
Those are pulled.
Exactly. The gamepads are pulled, and the pause button is a non-maskable interrupt going directly to the CPU.
It just halts the CPU.
Exactly. So for those that don't quite understand the difference, the console decides when to read the gamepad, but the pause button decides what the CPU executes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes that code jump immediately to the pause button code. So therefore, a pause button press on Master System, vectors to the CPU interrupt, and it handles the game's pause state, blah, blah, blah. On Game Gear, pause is handled by the start button usually, which is just a regular button like any other. So on Game Gear, it actually has an additional button that the Master System doesn't. So a hacked Game Gear game needs to intercept the routine handling the start button and remap it to a button or button combination on Master System. This isn't always possible, right? Or not always comfortable. If you think of a game like Mortal Kombat, which uses a start button to block, right? You can't really remap that to a button combination because that would be really awkward and make the game kind of unplayable.
Are there any games that just have the interrupt vector just return and not do anything? Or do they all halt? They go to a stop instruction or halt or pause or whatever?
I'm not sure actually if all games on Master System use the pause correctly.
But it's up to the game to do that, right? Okay.
Yeah, they
sorry,
could just.
Sorry, I was just curious.
Yeah, they could just RTI from there and not do anything. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah. So stereo sound is the other one I mentioned, right? But the issue that I found while researching this is the Game Gear adds 6 new registers on the I/O ports of the Z80, so hex 0 to hex 06, which exist on Game Gear. But writing to these on the SMS actually crashes the system, so you need to remove all of these writes to the fake I/O ports. The reason for that is because the I/O address space on SMS isn't fully decoded. There's just a few address lines used, so that whole address range is mirrored. So you might think that you're writing to 00 to 06, but in fact you're writing to the other ports just because not all address lines are decoded. The other major issue, like I said, is palette. Game Gear has 12-bit palette, but the SMS only has a 6-bit palette, so there's 64 possible colors. So when you're hacking a Game Gear ROM to run on Master System, you need to adjust all those palettes from 12 bits down to 6 bits. And these adjustments obviously need to be done in such a way that they maintain the game's look, and they need to look properly. And we've seen a lot of hacks that actually look good, right? But another thing that games do often is palette.
We've seen a few hacks that look good.
Okay, you've seen a few. All right. I was being generous here because we drilled on some things earlier, so I was trying to be nice. But anyway, so even if you can get the game to look good, games from then do a lot of things with palette cycling and palette fades, right? So if you're going to do a palette fade in with 12 bits, it's going to look drastically different than if you do a palette fade with 6-bit depth color. So games that do fade ins and fade outs might look really good on Game Gear, but that fade in is going to look like absolute shit on Master System because there's not nearly enough color depth to make it look good.
It's like the video version of color banding that you see, like sometimes in a compressed JPEG.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Thanks, Nick. You just totally threw it off.
I'm just trying to give somebody a representation in how it would look in a 2D image, like when you see big blobs of color that should gradually change.
The graduations are going to be very different.
Right. Yeah.
I think the YouTube article on that is called posterization or something.
Penization. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing that entails too is if you've been following this and are slightly, digital electronics inclined, you'll notice that the Game Gear palette being 12 bits and Z80 CPU being an 8-bit CPU, you actually need 2 instructions to write 1 palette entry on Game Gear. But on Master System, it's only 6 bits. You only need 1 CPU instruction to write to the palette. So therefore, a full palette update on Game Gear requires 64 writes, but a full palette update on Master System only requires 32 writes. So those whole software routines also need to be modified.
You need to pad them out, it sounds like. Put a delay loop or something in there so you have just as many machine cycles.
But sounds like you have to do it on a per game basis.
Right. It had to be tailored per game.
It absolutely must be done on a per game basis. You need to go in there and look at the disassembly. There's no automatic way to do this.
So that's a real pain in the ass, because like you're talking about the bit depth of the palette. Yeah, I mean, like, in order for, did you say one takes, 32 cycle? Say that again. Say that last part again, Renee.
They both have 2 palettes of 16 colors, right? But on Game Gear, you need 2 instructions per 12-bit palette entry to write to them, right? So that's 64 out instructions. And on Master System, you only need 1 out instruction to write to the palette, so it's 32 out instructions.
So it's literally half.
Yeah, it takes half the time to update the palette. So you still need to go and modify that code.
Yeah, wouldn't you have to put like a delay loop in there so that you have just as many cycles running, so that the everything's in time properly, like some sort of custom like countdown or something to count those cycles out?
Yeah, you want those. You don't want to affect the timing of the code. That's right.
That's such a pain in the ass. That's a very ambitious project, Renee, if they're taking that into account.
It is, and people have done this successfully. And the last thing is, like I said earlier, the non-maskable interrupt. So you need to go in and see if there's any code that just barrels past the address of the non-maskable interrupt on Master System. So code existing there on Game Gear needs to be rerouted, and proper NMI code needs to be inserted. Because you can't, because it's non-maskable, right? So if you're going to play a Game Gear game on Master System and you go and you press the pause button, whether you like it or not, the CPU is going to vector to that pause address. So you need to make sure it handles that and returns to your normal game code without affecting the game, because that's something that is physically impossible and will never happen on Game Gear.
Right.
So it sounds like for this to work, you would need to use only hacked cartridges. And using hacked cartridges that only work on this thing, this doesn't make any sense. So might as well just run the hacked ROMs on an EverDrive or something.
Yeah, there is a list on SMS Power of acceptable Game Gear to SMS hacks, right?
Yeah, where do you think that list came from?
It comes from Bob, yeah.
What it sounds like to me is, the only way for that to that would even work well is, it's more about them taking the time to go through 30 or 40 games to have at least a small comprehensive list of ROM hacks and very fast ROM edits that can be held within the firmware of this device. That way, when you plug a cartridge in, it reads the header of that cartridge and it runs it against the name table, and it finds, oh, you've put this cartridge in? Well, we have the ROM hack, we have the ROM edits in firmware to make this work. It fetches that and it patches the code in. That's the only way I could see that working, to where the consumer, you would have to manually find an IPS patch or hack something, is if you have the firmware updatable on this device, and even then that's going to be very limited.
Yeah, so
there's a few problems with that, though. The current hacks that are out there, most of them are done by 2 people who just, as a fun hobby, no disrespect, they just thought it was fun tracing down the different registers that you need to change to make a Game Gear game work on a Master System. So there's probably, 75 to 90% of the games that are converted are just made to work. And then the purpose was, hey, let's come back and work on this later if it's important. A few people took a lot of time to redo some of the games, and I'm very embarrassed that I forgot the guy's name, but guy or girl, I don't even know. But Tales Adventure was a phenomenal job done conversion. But the color palette, to my eyes, it was way better on Game Gear. So even if you have a perfect conversion with like the menu bars are moved over, you expand the Game Gear to the full Master System's resolution, you still have to deal with that, which is subjective. Go back to the Shmups forum with all the different NES RGB palettes on there, you know? So what you're saying is correct. They could have all of that data in a device that when you plug the cartridge in, it detects it. But that would mean that people would have had to have done the work to convert it beforehand.
That's what I said.
Yeah. So
not well enough, Zach. I had to.
I said it perfectly fine. Once again, you just fail to understand a lot of this. I'm sorry, Renee. Please continue, Renee.
Yeah. So exploring all of that,
Jesus,
I think it's 100% unfeasible for a device to contain these hacked ROMs or a patch of some kind and try to run the patch on your game. So that's definitely out of the question. That's not the approach that they're going to take. So then, and I've mentioned this a bit in passing before, is what if a Super Game Gear type device was created instead, right? So, and what do I mean by that is like a Super Game Boy, but Game Gear version. So the Super Game Boy is more or less a self-contained Game Boy inside the cartridge. So it has the CPU and all the hardware necessary to render the Game Boy's display, contents of which are then streamed to the SNES for it to display on the TV.
Not exactly, Renee. Not exactly.
I'm trying to keep it simple here.
But I'm just saying. But this is a really important point.
Okay.
The Game Boy sends its graphical data, and that's cached into the SNES's PPUs, and eventually the memory mapped screen of the Game Boy and all the sprite registers for the Game Boy and the background tiles and all that are emulated by the SNES PPU. That's not. I understand what you're saying, but I just want to make that clear that the rendering function and the graphical function is absolutely emulated by the SNES. Sorry,
Okay.
Go ahead. Just wanted to say that. Touch me in my naughty places tonight.
Can this be done on Genesis? So first of all, can a Game Gear display be DMA'd into the Genesis VDP?
Mm-hmm.
We see this often with shitty Sega CD FMV games, right? they DMA their video into Genesis VDP like there's no tomorrow, right? Usually in a small fraction of the display area, and definitely not at 60 frames per second. Most FMV games, they'll hover around like 10, 15. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll see like a 20 frames per second video displaying. In fact, why is this called full motion video? I mean, is there some half motion video I don't know about? That name always kind of
semi-motion
annoyed
video.
me. Yeah. So to figure this out, we need to figure out what the DMA bandwidth is during VBlank for Genesis. So memory to VRAM DMA can transfer approximately 205 bytes per line during VBlank. NTSC VBlank has 36 lines for Genesis. So that comes out to about 7.3 kilobytes DMA per frame. That's the theoretical maximum, right? So that's if you're doing nothing but DMA for the entirety of the VBlank. Obviously, it's going to be a bit less than that, but 7.3K is the theoretical maximum. So let's figure out the bytes necessary to DMA a full Game Gear screen, which is 160 pixels by 144 pixels. So assuming we, right off the bat, reduce the color depth to 9 bits to match the Genesis palette and not use the full 12 bits of Game Gear, right? We get, there's 160 pixels times 144 pixels resolution times 9 bits per pixel. So I get approximately 207,000 possible bytes of information, possible 9 bits of information per frame, right? So obviously a simple frame buffer is not going to do it because this is
too much.
Too much. You know, 7K versus 207K, big difference, right? Mm-hmm. It's not even close.
Yep.
So is there a more efficient way to do it? Like Zach ruined before, right? The Super Game Boy actually does, the SNES actually does the rendering and emulates the graphical capabilities of the Game Boy, right? So it's not drawing to a frame buffer like Star Fox or an FMV, right? The Super NES is actually using its own sprite engine to display the Game Boy information. So can a Genesis do this? Possibly. if we restrict the palette information in each frame to 2 palette updates per frame and only redraw the patterns on each frame, right? That means we get 360 visible tiles in the Game Gear's viewing window. Each VDP tile is 32 bytes. So that means we have 11,500 bytes per frame to update if we want to do a full pattern redraw update. Still too high for VDP. Where's brass processing when we need it to save us? Still too much data for VBlank DMA. So we can DMA, you can DMA data into the VDP during active scan, but it's much, much, much less data, right? During the entire active scan, I calculate you can DMA about 4,300 bytes per active scan. So if you add that to the existing 7.3K that you can do during VBlank, you get about 11,700 bytes per frame, which is practically 100% of the theoretical DMA max. In theory, you're not going to get nowhere near 11.7K of DMA per frame during active plus VBlank, because you need to set up those DMA queues. You need to read the gamepad input. You need to, branch from your loops and whatnot. So right, so there's a lot of overhead that needs to be done in order to do those DMAs. So that's out of the question as well. So now I think I do see a way that this is possible. So you need a Super Game Gear device, which essentially renders Genesis VDP commands, right? It's not going to render any tile information. It's not going to render any, not a frame buffer, not a tile buffer, but it needs to actually output code that the Genesis can just spit out to the VDP and exploit the VDP engine and exploit the tile engine of the Genesis, and not actually try to rely on producing the graphical data directly on the cartridge. I haven't made any calculations into this, but the first major obstacle I see is the Genesis and SMS, the Game Gear and SMS VDP. They have a play field that's 32 tiles wide by 28 tiles high, right? That's the viewing area. That's your character map. The Genesis VDP, the closest play field it has is 32 by 32. So it has 4 extra tile sets on top, which is going to totally mess up your scrolling, right? So if you're only scrolling horizontally, you're not going to get into those 4 extra tiles. But if you're going to start scrolling diagonally or vertically, you're going to constantly have to keep track of which 4 extra columns or 4 extra rows to move around in order to make sure that your scrolling is working properly. It's probably something that's hard to understand, but
yeah, unless you program that stuff, you're not going to understand.
yeah, it's something that is completely a showstopper in my opinion, right? Keeping track of those 4 extra columns and making sure they move around properly all the time.
4 extra rows?
Columns.
Rows.
It's 4 extra rows.
Okay,
horizontally.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
4 extra rows, right? So if you picture, right, like SMS will wrap around, 0 to 27, and then goes back to tile 0, right? And that's how you do your scrolling vertically.
Yep.
And the closest play field that you have on Genesis to do that is 32, right? So when you're moving down the Genesis play field, you're going to have to DMA those 4 rows back down into rows 28, 29, 30, 31 before you repeat again. But then if your play field goes back up halfway through, then you got to move them back up there and so on. And that's a giant mess I don't want to get into.
Sounds like a big goddamn waste of time to me, Renee.
Mm-hmm.
It is. So I have a hard time seeing how this is possible, where this tweets come from. And another major obstacle too is all Game Gears run at 60 hertz, right? So if you're going to do this on PAL, screw you, PAL.
So I believe what you're saying is your conclusion is the release date for this device will be the same as the Paprium release date.
Well, I just got a notification on my phone. Hold on, what is this? I got a Paprium mailing list update from Fonzie. Whoa, Holy shit. Okay. It says, okay, hold on. It says, thank you for your continued faith in the Paprium project. We are pleased to announce the imminent release of the Game Gear Meister chip, bypassing all DMA limitations on the Mega Drive and allowing full Game Gear support on Genesis. To be released in early 2019 or 10 years later, whichever. I'm enjoying everyone's
there, sir.
I'm enjoying everyone's money on my extended Caribbean vacation. Haha, suckers.
You had me going for a minute
nice.
there, sir.
You had me at Caribbean.
So my verdict on all of this is, while on the surface, it may seem possible with an extremely powerful FPGA. I think this is certainly no easy task, and in the end, the only possible solution that we're describing is essentially a system that on one end is a Game Gear, and on the other end outputs 68K assembly code, like a real-time compiler. Yeah, a real-time interpreter compiler, and that's just nuts. That's crazy. That's not worth the effort.
I think it's just. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So my recommendation: take your Game Gears and mail them to Voltar.
I knew you were going to say that, you son of a bitch.
And he'll mod them for you because he loves that shit.
Or mail them to Bob, and Bob will send a giant box of them over.
If I had enough space to do that, I would have an open thing where just send me your Game Gear, so once a year I could send Zach like 100 of them. It'd be amazing.
All of you who are commenting on this can go to hell forever.
All right, okay, so my real recommendation is, if you're so interested in getting your Game Gear games to run on a screen, and Voltar is a giant dick with you and he doesn't want to mod these, just learn how to hack the Game Gear games to run on SMS. In the end, it's going to be much easier and simpler than getting the Game Gears to run natively on Genesis, right? Which I think is practically impossible.
And the tools are out there. The team on SMS Power has bent over backwards to at least give you excellent instructions on how to find ways to do things like map start to a different button, or map start to... There's a whole bunch of hacks that allow you to use a Genesis controller on a Master System or on a Genesis that start is start. There's a lot of really awesome things that people have spent a lot of time on, allowing you to do these. We just need people to have the patience to go through and convert the games that matter. Excuse me. There was a couple of
Yeah, me too, Bob. The games that actually matter. None.
Sorry. There was a couple of casino games that got converted, and I'm like, oh my god, we could play checkers on our phone for free in HD resolution. Stop it. But things
what's
the
what's
games
really
that
interesting.
you can't play anymore.
Yeah, what's really interesting with these hacks is, even though the Game Gear has a much smaller screen real estate than what the SMS can display, they still use the same size playfield. And some Game Gear games actually have graphical data that's relevant to gameplay that's hidden by the Game Gear's display. The Game Gear is the center of the SMS display, right? And converting them to SMS sometimes reveals graphical information that you couldn't see, but it's still there on Game Gear. I think that's amazing.
And some Game Gear games that are ports of Master System, like that Mickey Magical Adventure, I think it is. Jesus Christ, Nick, can you please put your dogs up? I can't even remember what I was going to say because of Nick's fucking bestiality. Stop it, Nick.
They hear the deer. Sorry.
Yeah. I bet they do, you sick man.
And the other thing I want to mention too is, and I've said it multiple times on this podcast, is I talked about the SMS Power forum a bit, and I've said that I'm completely against forums and I hate them, and then the worst possible scum of human existence goes on forums, except SMS Power. They're amazing.
Cool. I've been there a few times, but yeah, it seems like a decent enough community for sure.
All forums suck without exception, except SMS Power.
That's right.
All right, we should move this along. Do we have enough time to do a Dreamcast aspect ratio thing? How long is that? It's a long time.
Hours.
I'm done. I'm fucking done.
60 hours to make that goddamn video.
All right,
like a whole podcast.
We will do that. in the next podcast. But before we go, I need to thank some people for super chatting to my yacht fund.
You're welcome, by the way, Nick. I saw those, you sick bitch. You're welcome.
John sent money for my Model 1 Sega CD fund. I mean, limited edition Soldier Boy consoles, which can't get anymore, unfortunately. I guess I'll have to go on Amazon. Thanks to Chris for donating because he really liked the soldering iron that Voltar shilled. And
There's a few of those who have said that.
Surprise Cafeg, I don't know how to say that.
What?
That was his name. Said Lord Voltar's SNES RGB mod made my picture extremely sensual, and recommended soldering iron has been great for his body. Thanks, Daddy. So thank you guys for donating. Voltar will get $0 of those dollars. I will blow it all on Taco Bell.
On pound cables.
Yeah, pound cables.
Well, you guys have got to come out with a decent product, HD Rectal Vision. I mean, so you're going to have to reverse engineer. And what you need to do is you just need to take the guts out of the pound cables and put them in a Radio Shack hobby project box and just laminate your little logo on there.
Yeah, that's right. Well, all right, let's
That'd be the extent of the quality of your bullshit. Anyways, let's
It'll
go
be better
on.
than what we have. No, that's it.
I'm hungry. I want Taco Bell.
Those are the super chats. Thank you guys. Thanks everyone for joining. This was like the highest attended podcast we ever had. We had almost 200 people at one point, so that's pretty awesome.
What did I tell you? What did I tell you? You're welcome.
Make sure to smash whatever subscribe button before you go.
And also, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube, but absolutely unsubscribe from this podcast.
No, Voltar's totally right. If you want to see more of him, go to youtube.com/retrorgb, click the little bell and subscribe, and you're good to go.
But you'll notice that my Slim Adkins diet didn't quite work as well as we all thought it would. Sorry, Bob.
I love it.
You walked right into that, you dirty bastard.
Well then, we will see you next time. We're going to try to do a game stream. Hopefully we can figure out a way for us to play games together. I think it would be cool to do a Tetris thing, maybe. Or I don't know. We'll figure something out.
No, wait a minute.
Commentary. I'll do the commentary on the Tetris. I love the commentary.
Me and Steve have talked about this several times, and we talked about it rather recently. What we were thinking about doing is, I know Bob doesn't have the motor skills to do it, but we were wanting to play something like Doom or some sort of FPS where 3 or 4 of us play, and then you have one commentator, because Nick actually found out that Twitch has some sort of proprietary technology to where they allow 4 separate streams, like 4 of us could play, and they combine into one sort of display.
Yeah,
and
we'll have to mess around with that to see if it's feasible first.
Yeah, we looked into that on Sunday. I don't remember what we found out.
I mean, the deal is, I think we'd all have to have our own Twitch accounts, and we all, be playing on our own Twitch stream. But then they all merge the separate Twitch streams. So it's not like you guys are all feeding in to my Twitch stream or something, and then I display it. It's we all have our own going, and they create like a merged one. But we'll have to look more into it and see what we can.
We'll check it out. But that's something where we would love to do, but we need to.
We'll do a test stream on Voltar's channel first.
Yeah, classic Voltar test stream.
Yeah.
Boom, Tetris for Renee.
Boom.
Oh, that's a nice T-spin.
Oh, he's got some bad RNG.
Oh, that's a classic Tetris head shake. Not getting that RNG you wanted.
And our viewership is going down by the second.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Guys, take it easy.
Next time.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.